Hey, it's Mika. Sorry guys for not uploading on Sunday. I had a stomachache and I've kind of still been getting over it. Also, thank you for 800 subscribers, which I guess is kind of 850 now. Anyway. Deku? I think he's some pro. By clouds. My head in the clouds, not coming down. Chapter 5. The Recommendation Exam. Okay. Kid. The recommendation exam is in a little over 2 months. It takes place about a month before the standard exam, so that if a student doesn't make the cut for the recommendation spots, they can still try again with the general populace. Izuku looked up at Eraserhead, from where he was stretching on the floor of the gym. I guess that makes sense. How many spots are open? Normally 4, although I think Nezu is looking into making another spot this year due to extenuating circumstances. Izuku frowned. You mean because people would get mad if a quirkless kid took one of the recommendation spots? Aizawa sighed, but nodded. It's the world we live in, kid. But we'll deal with it if we have to. For now, we just need to focus on getting you physically ready so you don't die. What training have you done so far? Izuku thought for a moment. Well, I mostly focused on my mental abilities, obviously. Then when you guys started sending me videos, I realized just how physically fit heroes need to be. Even if I'd kind of given up by that point, it was still inspiring. I started lifting weights and jogging. I even tried a little parkour and free running, even if I'm not very good yet. I'm a lot stronger than I used to be, but... He hugged himself. I'm still pretty weak. Sorry. Aizawa felt his heart break. This kid was obviously doing amazing when you considered that everyone told him it was impossible to even try, but he still had a long way to go. Alright. I want you to keep doing what you've been doing. We're not going to be able to make a huge difference in strength in just 2 months, but we can improve your speed and parkour, as well as get you some combat skills. He gestured for Izuku to stand up. So, Deku, do you know how to fall or take a hit? I mean, I've been hit plenty of times before, so I think I know that one. Aizawa's expression soured. That is not the same thing. I guess that's what we'll start with. When Izuku went home that night, he was sore and covered in bruises, but he couldn't keep the smile off his face. He could do it. He could be a hero. He might not be able to be like All Might, but the more he thought about it, being an underground hero sounded like more fun anyway. The next 2 months flew by. Izuku trained with a different pro hero every day of the week. Eraser taught him hand-to-hand combat. Miss Joke took him on parkour runs. Mr. Brave helped him with speed. It was amazing. Izuku felt so much stronger, and even if he couldn't hold his own against Eraser yet, he wasn't falling into dumpsters as often as he had when he was doing parkour on his own. The morning of the recommendation exam, Izuku opened his computer to find dozens of good luck messages. Apparently, word had gotten around that Deku was a lot younger than anyone had thought, and they were all excited for him. It was contagious. Not that he wouldn't have been excited without the messages, he still would have been, it's just... he probably would have been a lot more nervous than excited. Inko waved to Izuku as he left, then let her hand fall as soon as he was out of sight. Her baby, off to go be a hero. As she wiped the tears from her eyes, even she didn't know if they were happy tears or sad ones. You have 3 hours for the written portion of the exam. Begin! Izuku sat in the auditorium with the other students after the written portion. He didn't think he got 100%, because he probably got at least a few questions wrong in the English portion, but there had been a hero analysis essay at the end that, while optional, would probably bring up his score. But that wasn't what he was worried about. Hello, listeners! Rock on! The written part of the recommendation test is over! The practical's next, and then, finally, the interview! Izuku resisted the urge to mutter like a fanboy, as the voice hero explained. This portion will be a 3-kilometer obstacle course run in groups of 6. We will be looking not only at your times, but at your ingenuity and your use of quirks. So please, go all out! As you leave the auditorium, please take a number from either Midnight or Snipe. These will determine what group you'll be in for the race. Any questions? Alright, let's go! As they slowly filed out of the auditorium, Izuku looked around him and tried to evaluate the quirks of those around him. There were a few obvious mutant quirks, but there were some, like a boy with a skull face, and another with two-toned hair, that weren't as obvious. Some didn't appear to have physical manifestations of their quirk at all. Izuku tried to calm his breathing. No matter what, he knew that all of them had strong quirks. They wouldn't have been recommended otherwise. And soon, Izuku would have to face them. He counted his blessings that he wouldn't be facing them in combat. Even with 2 months of training, he still ended up on his back most of the time, and he wasn't sure he was ready to face people using their quirks quite yet. The first group was called up and went to the starting line. Present Mike nodded to Snipe, who pointed his gun to the sky and fired. The 6 were off quickly, and Izuku felt his stomach sink as he saw their quirks. They were amazing. Izuku couldn't possibly compete. One boy controlled the wind to blow him forward while leaving his opposition in dust. Another stayed neck and neck with him by skating on ice that he shot from his foot. To Izuku, it seemed like the race was over before it even began, with the wind user finishing just barely ahead of the ice guy. Even Present Mike seemed shocked. He forced himself to pay attention as the next group ran the course, thankfully much slower since this group didn't have anyone with quirks that allowed him to completely ignore all the obstacles. They all used their quirks creatively, and Izuku tried not to think about what everyone else would think when he didn't use a quirk at all during the exam. Hey, are you okay? Izuku jerked up to see a girl with a high ponytail looking at him with concern. You were breathing kind of fast. Yeah, Izuku said. I guess I'm just kinda nervous. Everyone here has such amazing quirks. The girl laughed. Yeah, I guess so. My name's Momo Yayorozu. You? Izuku Midoriya. Nice to meet you, Midoriya. My group's next. Wish me luck. Izuku nodded as she left, and went to the starting line. This time he watched carefully, to see how everyone used their quirks to make it past the obstacles. Yayorozu apparently had some sort of creation quirk, because she pulled a pair of roller skates from nowhere to breeze past the flat sections, and made a spring-loaded grappling hook to fly up to the cliff. Another used her oil secretion quirk to slide more quickly down the slide, and to make the track more slick for the other examinees. With each group that went, Izuku got more and more ideas on how to pass the obstacles, and he got more and more excited. He even saw opportunities where students were underutilizing their quirks, and got ideas to help them improve. Yeah, he couldn't replicate any of their quirks, but he could take the best ideas from all of them and get a decent time. Finally, it was Izuku's turn to be called, and he took a deep breath as he walked to the starting line. He bounced on his toes as ideas bounced around in his mind on how to clear the obstacles. The moment Snipe's gun went off, he ran towards the first obstacle, which looked like the first hill of a roller coaster. The other students were already starting to climb up the side, as Izuku reached the base of it and looked around. He smiled as he grabbed a small board from the base and tucked it inside his shirt, then started climbing up towards the apex. Most of the students were climbing straight across, rather than up, and they were already on the second half, which some had already cleared the obstacle. Izuku hoped this gamble would pay off, and that Eraser wouldn't kill him if he fell before he pulled himself up to stand on the top of the wooden structure. He pulled out the board he brought and set it on the thin metal track that lined the top, then carefully stood on top of it as if it was a skateboard, pinwheeling his arms as he almost lost his balance. With a quick prayer, he shoved off and began to slide down the hill, rocketing past the 2 students that were still climbing, putting him in 4th place. He hit the ground with a roll when he reached the end of the track and looked at the next obstacle, which involved hopping from different sized pillars that ascended up to a thin wall. Unfortunately, there wasn't anything he could do to speed this up, but he was grateful for his parkour training as he jumped easily, maintaining his place in the running. The next obstacle was a thin cement wall about the width of a balance beam that students were running across. Izuku stood in shock for a moment as he watched the 2nd place examinee, a blue-haired boy with engines in his legs, literally glide across the wall on his heels. Was he related to Ingenium? Izuku shook his head and started running. The next obstacle wasn't so much of an obstacle as a slide that dumped into a pool of water. Izuku thought back to Engine Boy who'd been gliding on his heels. If he could reduce the surface that touched the slide, he could reduce the friction and move faster. He also remembered the girl with the oil quirk from a few rounds before, and looked quickly. There! A line on the left half of the slide was slightly more shiny than the rest, from where she had made it more slick. Izuku laid down and pushed off, lifting his body so that only his heels and shoulders were touching the slide. The decreased friction combined with the oil, and he managed to pass another examinee, putting him in 3rd place. He swam quickly towards the next obstacle, a cliff face that went straight up. He didn't have a grappling hook like Yaoyorozu did, but he had seen her drop it when she cleared the cliff. He took a deep breath and dived. Sure enough, there it was, sitting at the bottom of the pool. He grabbed it and pulled himself up onto the ledge at the bottom of the cliff. He took a moment to familiarize himself with his new tool, then looked up. The obstacle after the cliff climb was a rope strung across 2 spires, then climbing down the 2nd spire to arrive at the top of a plateau. Izuku thought for a moment before aiming. Hopefully he wouldn't be penalized for this. He smiled as he felt it catch, then braced himself and pressed the button to retract it. He was yanked from his location, flew past both the cliff climb and the rope bridge, and hit the side of the plateau. Hard. Izuku groaned as he pulled himself up and took note of where the other students were. He was now in 2nd place. He couldn't see the 1st place examinee, but he'd seen all the previous examinees disappear for a moment before re-emerging from the waterfall, so he assumed there was some sort of cave. He paused as he saw a narrow fissure in the middle of the plateau, with rock climbing holds on both sides going down. The gap was only about 4 feet wide in most areas, and Izuku was just over 5 feet tall, so... He nodded resolutely, then braced himself with an arm and a leg on either side of the fissure, and shimmied down as quickly as he could. At the bottom of the fissure was a short tunnel that Izuku would have to army crawl through, and the first examinee had just entered it. Thankfully, the tunnel was wide enough for multiple people. Izuku got down on his stomach and moved as quickly as he could, passing the 1st place examinee at the very end of the tunnel. There was a waterfall in front of them, and Izuku ran straight towards it without pausing. He'd seen plenty of others run out of the waterfall in the previous rounds. The water was cold and almost knocked him over, but he kept running until he could breathe again. From here, it was a straight shot to the finish line. Izuku ran as hard as he could, hearing the footsteps of the other examinee as he struggled to catch up. There was a cry behind him, and Izuku heard the sound of engines. No! Mini Ingenium. Izuku pushed himself harder. Almost there. But Mini Ingenium was going too fast on a straightaway, and he zoomed past Izuku, who crossed the finish line a full 5 seconds after. Gasping to breathe and fighting tears. 2nd place. Good, but not good enough. He needed to be the best if he was going to prove that a quirkless student belonged in the hero course. Hey, Midoriya! Yaoyorozu was at his side. That was amazing! I hadn't even considered that anyone else would try to use my grappling hook. I wish I'd thought to bypass an obstacle like that. That was shameful! Minnie Ingenium cried, chopping his hands through the air. You were supposed to use your own quirk, not coast by on the work of others. Izuku felt his heart sink. Minnie Ingenium was right. He wouldn't have done half as well if he hadn't paid attention to the other rounds and used them to his advantage. He really was worthless, wasn't he? Why did he think he deserved this? Hey now, listener! Don't be so hard on him, Present Mike interrupted. We told everyone to go all out, and this examinee showed great creativity and used the environment to his advantage, an essential trait for any hero. Not everyone has physical quirks, you know? Minnie Ingenium straightened. My apologies. He bowed to Midoriya. I see that I was in the wrong. On further consideration, it really was truly impressive how you managed to get ahead of all the other examinees. My name is Tenya Ida. What is yours? Izuku's eyes widened. He didn't think anyone had ever apologized to him before. Izuku Midoriya, he started out. Nice to meet ya. Minnie Ingenium, Ida, smiled. It is a pleasure to meet you as well. All right! Present Mike yelled. Now don't get too down if you didn't get first in the obstacle races. We'll be deciding who gets the recommendation spots based on a combination of the written, physical, and interview. So if you did poorly, don't lose hope. And if you did well, don't get too comfortable. Now go. Get to the locker rooms and get cleaned up. Interviews will be in Principal Nezu's office in 30 minutes. Don't be late! Chapter 6. The Interview. All the examinees sat awkwardly in the lobby outside Nezu's office, waiting for their turn to be called. The atmosphere was tense, not only because everyone was nervous, but because the boy with the wind quirk kept glaring at the boy with the ice quirk, who didn't seem to notice and kept staring straight ahead. Izuku couldn't think of a reason why the wind was so angry at ice, considering that wind won their round of physical, but he figured there must be a good reason. Unless, of course, wind was like Kachan, and just angry all the time. That was always a possibility. Better give him a wide berth. So, a girl with green hair broke the silence. That physical was something else, right? Yeah, another examinee laughed. Some serious American Ninja Warrior stuff. Do you think we'll really have to climb that much as heroes? My arms are still sore. I think it will depend on what kind of hero you want to be. Izuku hadn't even realized he'd opened his mouth until everyone was looking at him. Oh no. He hurried on in a panic. I mean, well, daylight heroes probably don't have to climb as much since most daytime villains are on the street level, but it's really helpful for underground heroes to get a bird's-eye view of situations, and they spend most of their time patrolling from the rooftops rather than the streets. Daylight heroes stay on the street so that people can see them, so they don't have much use for climbing, except for maybe in a rescue situation, and I'll shut up now. Izuku's face was hot in embarrassment, and he looked at the floor as the rest of the examinees stared at him. I never really thought of it that way, Yaoyorozu said. And Izuku shot her a grateful look. I'm planning on being a spotlight hero myself. I never really hear about underground heroes, so I sometimes forget they exist. That's kind of the point of underground heroes, though, isn't it? So that no one really knows they exist? The green-haired girl spoke up. I've considered going that route, but I'm not really sure. My quirk is kind of gross, so I'm not sure if I'll ever be popular anyway. Izuku perked up. Your quirk involves disconnecting your limbs, right? I saw you use it a few times during the practical. How much muscle control do you have of a body part when it's disconnected? What would happen if a body part was injured or destroyed and if it wasn't... Izuku realized he was rambling and quickly slammed his mouth shut. The green-haired girl sat in shock for a moment before responding. Yeah. My quirk is called Lizard Tail Splitter, and it allows me to disconnect any part of my body at will. I can split up to 50 pieces at a time. Her right hand disconnected and scudded towards Izuku up to his arm, poking him in the cheek. I can fully control them, even disconnected, and can levitate them. If any are destroyed, I can regenerate them, but it takes a lot of energy, so I prefer to just call them back if I can. That's so cool, Izuku gushed. That would be great for underground work. Most villains wouldn't even think to look for an eye or an ear hiding in the corner of their room, so your quirk could be perfect for intelligence gathering. It would also probably be useful for sabotage, since a hand could easily fit into small spaces. You would make a wonderful underground hero if you choose. Just don't do it because you think your quirk is gross. She smiled widely. Thanks. I never thought of it like that. Izuku nodded. Yaoyorozu, your quirk is some kind of creation, right? That grappling hook was really complicated, but you made it no problem. What kind of objects can you create? Yaoyorozu smiled. My quirk is called creation. I can transform the lipids in my body to any non-living thing I want, but I have to understand the molecular structure. I've been studying chemistry since I first developed my quirk, so I can produce any element on the periodic table fairly easily, as well as most known molecules. It's just a question of how they all come together. Most of the other examinees were paying attention to the conversation now, and were quick to pipe up with their own observations of Yaoyorozu's quirk. After that, another person piped up, and soon everyone was sharing their quirks. Even Wind and Ice had been roped into the discussion. Yeah! My quirk is Whirlwind! I can control any wind, and I am super passionate about hero work! Izuku was almost physically blown back by the sheer energy that Wind put off. Okay, so being constantly angry like Kachan was out, but if he said passion was so important, it was easy to see why he didn't like Ice, who remained blank-faced and probably didn't express passion for anything. Now it was Ice's turn. He paused for a moment, then said flatly, My quirk is called half hot, half cold. I can produce ice from my right side and fire from my left, but I don't use my fire. His tone clearly communicated that he was done talking, and everyone sat awkwardly for a moment as they digested his declaration. Wind was glaring at him again, with even more intensity than before. Well, that's cool then, Yaoyorozu said finally, then turned to Izuku. What about you, Midoriya? What's your quirk? It wasn't really obvious from the physical round. Izuku's stomach sank. Of course they were going to ask about his quirk. These were the first people that acted like they could be friends since he'd gotten his quirk. Well, besides the underground heroes. But they didn't really count because they were all so much older than him. They'd reject him as soon as they knew. Everyone did. How was he going to get out of this? All of a sudden, the door to Nezu's office opened, and an examinee walked out, followed by the principal himself. Izuku Midoriya. Izuku nodded in relief, and practically ran into the office. Nezu smiled knowingly, and shut the door behind him. Have a seat. See all the famous Deku I've heard so much about. I'll tell you the truth, I was quite surprised to hear that you were so young. Izuku sat down from across the principal and nodded. I honestly wasn't trying to trick anyone, he laughed. I freaked out when I realized how old Eraser and everyone thought I was. I thought it would be obvious from my analysis that I was just a fanboy. Nezu poured 2 cups of tea and took a sip. I've read some of your analysis. They are extremely impressive. Izuku shook his head quickly. They're really not. They're just some fanboys rambling, and I have no idea why heroes like them so much. Everyone else seems to think they're creepy. Well, Nezu clapped his hands together. While we're on the subject, perhaps you wouldn't mind giving me a brief analysis of your fellow examinees. Izuku's eyes lit up as he began to wonder. Well, there's Yaoyorozu. She's got a creation quirk that is super cool. It wouldn't be easy to use, but she's put a massive amount of work learning chemistry so that she can create pretty much anything. The only weakness I can see are maybe how fast she can think under pressure. Also, she has to create a lot in a short amount of time. I'm not sure she has the fat stores for that. Then there's the girl with the lizard tail quirk, and she can separate her body parts, which would be perfect for intelligence gathering. The interview continued, with Izuku rambling as Nezu listened and sipped his tea, occasionally interrupting with an observation or question. Before Izuku knew it, a half-hour had passed, and there were 2 empty cups of tea sitting on the desk. Well, Deku, thank you, Nezu stood and walked around the desk. You may go rejoin the other applicants outside, or you may go home if you wish. Wait, the interview's over? Izuku looked confused. But I just did some analysis, which I was gonna do for fun anyway. Isn't the interview supposed to be difficult? Aren't you supposed to ask why I deserve a place at UA? Why I deserve to be a hero? Nezu looked at him curiously. Your analysis is a valuable skill, and I never doubted that you were deserving as you put it. Would you prefer the interview be more difficult? Izuku waved his hands. Well, no, it's just... He rubbed the back of his neck. This just felt like tea with a friend. Nezu's eyes brightened, and he smiled. And I hope we can do this again sometime, regardless of your results. Izuku returned the smile, and Nezu led him back out into the lobby and grabbed the next student. And just like that, his entrance exam was over. Chapter 7. Acceptance. Izuku had an anxiety attack every day, right before the mail came. He tried to tell himself that it was just a letter, that it wasn't important and wasn't worth getting worked up over. But it wasn't just a letter, was it? It was a letter from UA. A letter that would determine his future. A letter that would tell him whether or not he was worthy to be a hero. And there it was. The anxiety attack was back. Izuku sighed. He thought he'd already done this today. Why did he have to do it again? It had been a week since the entrance exam, and there still wasn't a letter. Not that the letter wouldn't come later than a week after the exam. Present Mike had said in the introduction that letters normally came between 5 days to 2 weeks after, but Izuku just wanted this to be over with already. It was a torture just waiting, not knowing if he was good enough or not. There was a knock at the door. Izuku! His mum called out. Could you get the door? My hands are full making dinner. Okay, Mum. He got up from the couch and opened the door, only to do a double take when he saw who it was. Hey, kid, Eraser said. We brought you something. Can we come in? Izuku stood aside in shock, allowing Eraser, Miss Joke, and Mr. Brave, all in civilian garb, to come inside. Sorry Nighteye couldn't come, Miss Joke said. He's in the middle of a major case right now. Yeah, right, Brave laughed. The old man's just a spoil sport. Mom? Izuku said, as he walked into the kitchen, the 3 pro heroes trailing close behind. These are my friends. This is Eraserhead, Miss Joke, and Mr. Brave. Inko's eyes widened. These are the pro hero friends you told me about when you were recommended, right? When Izuku nodded, she bowed. Thank you all for being so kind to my son. I was so excited when he told me he had friends, so imagine my shock a few months ago when I learned that all his friends were pro heroes. Eraser raised an eyebrow. He suspected that Izuku didn't get a lot of encouragement to be a hero, but all his friends? She was probably exaggerating. He's a great kid, Midoriya-san. Miss Joke laughed. We're lucky to have met him. By the way, since I'm not in costume right now, you can just call me Emi Fukakato. Nice to meet you, Fukakato-san. Yeah, me too, Mr. Brave said. My name is Haruto Nakamura. The other 2 looked at Eraser, who stared back a minute before sighing. I'm Shoto Aizawa. Deku's a smart kid. You must be proud of him. Inko's face soured slightly at the nickname, but it was almost too fast for the pros to catch before she was smiling again. I am. I wish you would pick a better career path, though. Heroics isn't very forgiving for someone like Izuku. Izuku looked like he wanted to sink into the floor as the room went cold. Fix this. So, Why are you guys here? Not that you're not welcome, you totally are. It's just, you've never come over before, and you guys sounded like you planned this, but I didn't know about it. Unless I forgot. Oh no, did I forget? Mr. Brave, Nakamura, laughed. No, Deku, you didn't forget. We wanted to surprise you. Show him, Eraser. Aizawa rolled his eyes, but had a small smile as he reached into his pocket and took out an envelope. My UA letter? Aizawa handed it to the kid, who looked at it with wide eyes. Of course, kid. Did you forget I work at UA? We wanted to be here with you when you open it. Izuku looked to his mother, who smiled sadly. You and your friends go open it in the living room. I'll keep working on dinner, and you can all come eat after, okay? Izuku nodded, and went back to sit on the couch. Aizawa sat beside him, while Nakamura sat on the chair, and Fukakado made her home on the floor. All three looked at Izuku in anticipation, and he took a deep breath, before tearing open his envelope. He then promptly started crying. Oh no! Eraser, I thought you said it was good news! I'm going to kill you! Fukakado screamed. Aizawa looked slightly panicked. It is good news. I don't know why he's crying, I swear. I'm just happy. Izuku choked out, saving Aizawa from being physically wrestled to the floor. I made it! I'm going to UA! I'm gonna be a hero! Congratulations, Deku! Nakamura said. You deserve it. Fukakado gave him a big hug. Oh, I'm so excited for you! I kinda wish you were coming to Ketsubutsu with me, but you're gonna need Nezu to help you with that big brain of yours. She sighed. Oh well, there's still internships, and I'm sure you hear about me all the time since Eraser's madly in love with me. No, I'm not, Aizawa denied. Stop telling people that joke. It's not a joke, I am! Fukakado laughed loudly, and tried to mess up Aizawa's hair, but he dodged and scowled at her. She responded by sticking out her tongue. I swear even Deku is more mature than you. Maturity is overrated, Nakamura said, then crossed his eyes and pulled a face, making Izuku giggle. Aizawa looked dead inside. You're all impossible. I hate all of you. Except for Joke, Nakamura said. You love her. Izuku laughed even harder. So this is what having friends really felt like. Somehow when Joke teased, it didn't feel the same as when Kachan did it. It wasn't hurtful at all, it was just friends giving each other a hard time. It was nice. Dinner's ready. Inko looked to where her son was laughing on the floor with his friends. Even if she didn't want him to be a hero, she thought she could deal with it, if it meant he had friends like these. Thanks, Mom. Izuku led his friends back to the kitchen, and they all sat down. Thanks for the food, Midoriya-san, Fukakado said, as they dug in. Yeah, this tastes amazing, Nakamura added. Inko smiled. It's really the least I can do. And besides, we have to celebrate my baby boy getting into his dream school. She leveled a serious look at Aizawa. I trust you'll take care of him and make sure he stays safe. Aizawa nodded solemnly. Of course, Midoriya-san. I would never send Deku into a situation he wasn't prepared for. We'll take him along on internships, and we'll always be there to protect him if things get dangerous. Deku may be smarter than most pros, but he's still a student, and will be treated accordingly. Good. Inko sighed. I'll hold you to that, Aizawa-san. So, Eraser! I guess you can't expel your whole class this semester. Brave smiled. Because that would mean expelling Deku, too. You expelled a whole class? Inko was wide-eyed. Aizawa put down his fork. I only expel kids who have no potential. It's cruel to let them continue when they'll only end up getting themselves or others killed. I won't expel Deku because he has potential. I wouldn't have recommended him otherwise. I find it hard to believe that an entire class was completely devoid of potential, Izuku insisted. They must have had strong quirks. You're living proof that quirks aren't everything, Aizawa said. They might have had strong quirks, but their personalities convinced me that they didn't have what it takes. Spoiled brats, every single one of them. No one had ever told them no, and let them get away with murder just because of their quirks. That's not how you raise a hero. Heroes have to be willing to protect people and give it their all, not just coast by and be the best. Izuku couldn't help but think of Kachan. Everyone praised him no matter what he did, simply because his quirk was perfect for heroics. But Erasa couldn't be talking about people like Kachan, couldn't he? After all, Kachan would be an amazing hero. Most teachers aren't as strict on expulsions as Erasa here, Midoriya-san, Fukikado explained. I teach at another hero school, and I probably expel maybe one student a year. Sometimes I don't expel any at all. It all depends on the class. Then again, Ketsubutsu isn't as competitive as UA. Oh, that's good, I guess. One of Izuku's oldest friends is going to be applying to UA as well, and I wouldn't want to have to deal with Mitsuki if her son gets expelled. Don't worry about Kachan, Mom. I'm sure he won't have any problem getting in, and I know he'll be the best hero. Inko smiled. You're right, it's silly to worry. Who knows, maybe you two will be in the same class. Aizawa hoped he was imagining the tension that came into Deku's shoulders at that. Maybe. No matter what, you'll probably make some of the best friends you've ever had in hero school, Nakamura said. I know I did. Maybe you'll find someone you have instant chemistry with, like me and Erasa, Fukikado said, while Aizawa rolled his eyes. Oh, are you two together? Inko asked. How did you two meet? We're not, Aizawa started, but Fukikado interrupted him. Our agencies were nearby when we were first starting out. In between missions and drama, a mutual love blossomed. No, it didn't, Aizawa muttered. Nakamura and Izuku snickered. That sounds so romantic, Inko sighed. We aren't dating, Midoriya-san, Aizawa said. Not yet, Fukikado said. But don't worry, Midoriya-san. I'll win him over eventually. A mischievous glint came into Inko's eye as she looked between the two, and Aizawa gulped. It's alright, Fukikado-san. I understand completely, Inko said. Did you know I had known Izuku's father for almost a year by the time he realized I was flirting with him? Mom! Izuku cried out in betrayal. Fukikado just laughed. Well, at least we've passed that stage of courtship. I doubt Erasa could ignore my flirting. Neither can anybody else. That's the problem, Aizawa said. Oh, so you want me to be more subtle in my affections? I can do that. Aizawa just sighed as everyone laughed at him. Deku, don't encourage her. Why not? Izuku said innocently. You two are so cute together. This made Nakamura spit out his drink, as Aizawa looked betrayed. I trusted you, Deku. I trusted you and you stabbed me in the back and left me with her. That was amazing, Deku! Fukikado held out her hand for a fist bump, which Izuku took her up on. Don't be so dramatic, Erasa. I'll win you over eventually and you know it. Aizawa just sighed and shook his head. More like you'll wear me down. Your way of flirting is like a war of attrition. He turned to look at Izuku as he pointedly changed the subject. So, Deku, we need to talk about internship options. Don't internships happen after school starts? Inko asked. Normally, yes. Your son, however, is a special case. He's been working with us in an advisory role for several months at this point, and there is a raid coming up that we invited him on before knowing how young he is. We still think that his input will be essential, but he needs to be part of an official internship in order to come. Inko looked worried. We'll make sure he stays safe while allowing him to contribute to the mission. Internships for first years normally only last a week, and we've been arguing non-stop about who gets to take you, Fukukato said. One of the options we thought of is having you do a few different internships in the next 2 months leading up to the raid. That way you'll get more intensive training to make sure you're ready, and we can all stop fighting. Izuku's eyes went wide. That sounds amazing. Can I, Mum? Please? Izuku looked at him for a long moment, before caving. You're sure that these internships will help him be safe? The three heroes nodded. Then, okay. But don't put yourself in any more danger than you need to. And listen to the heroes, okay? Okay. He hugged her tightly. Thank you so much, Mom. Thanks for dinner, Midoriya-san. Congratulations, Deku, Fukukato said, as the heroes left. See you for training and internships. And don't forget there's a meeting planned Saturday, Nakamura said. Detective Sakauchi will be picking you up. I still don't understand why I can't just walk, Izuku said sullenly. It's because you're still a kid. Aizawa ruffled Izuku's hair. Problem child. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you're a Baku Squad enthusiast like myself, maybe consider checking out my playlists. I've been releasing them periodically, and I'm pretty proud of how they turned out, with voiceovers and everything. Anyway, hope you have a good day or night wherever you are.